Hello everyone and welcome back to this video. So today we are going to taking a look how to run local models on our machine. And we are specifically taking a look at the Qwen models from Alibaba. But without further ado, let's dive in. So then let's get started. The first thing we need is Ollama. Ollama is something that you actually, I'm sure that you know it, is something you can download from the internet. Why it has some kind of UI, we are not going to use it for now. It is used for running local LLMs, and I already have some installed. So if we go here and say in the terminal Ollama ls, we already see the models I have installed. For today, we will focus on these two models by Qwen from Alibaba, which are rather good for the sake of this demo. So now that we know that our what models are installed, we will run our first model. So what we are going to do is Ollama run, and then we are choosing the small one here, the Qwen 3 1.7b. So if you have started this, the next thing you want to do to understand what's going on here is doing Ollama PS. And this will show you somehow the stats of the model, which is very important when running a local model. So what we see here that it's currently using 6 gigabytes of RAM and that it's entirely running inside our GPU, and it has a so-called context window of 40K. We will get to that later. So what does it actually mean? So for me, lucky as I have this Apple Silicon, this is not doing advertisement, just for explanation, which features an M5 processor with 24 gigabytes of unified RAM, and this unified RAM means that the 24 gigabytes can be used for either the CPU or the GPU, which means that my GPU has about 24, not really, because the operating system also needs, let's say it has about 16 gigabytes of RAM available. And this is very important because with this setup, the entire model can fit inside the GPU, and this makes it very, very fast. So if you have a separate setup with Ollama, you can also run it on Linux or something, and you don't have a graphics card like this. It can also run on a CPU, but it will get very slow. So here on our Mac, we have the advantage that it's running very fast. Okay, so now let's start with our first task, and I am doing something simple because I want to do some coding here. I say, please create me a simple HTML. Okay, and now we see Qwen is a thinking model. The small one we've chosen here is a rather fast one. It says, here is my HTML. So yeah, it has a very basic HTML with a hello world. So now what I'm going to do is say, please write it to a file index.html. Now it's thinking again and it's putting out some things, but it's not doing it. It will just again give me the HTML output. And why is that? Well, this is one of the first things we have to learn. So while this chat is very capable of just chatting, it has no so-called tools. So it does not know how to interact with my local computer. See, Ollama is the server side of things, and now we connect it via client. And this client does not know how to use tools to interact with our file system. So is that something we can do about it? Sure. So this is my transcript here. We have already gone to a lot of things. So one of the things we need to understand is that we can interact with our Ollama just via a simple curl request. So if I say like this is a curl request with the model and the prompt here, please create me a simple HTML file. I can also directly talk to Ollama, but you already see this is not very beneficial because we now have this very big rundown of responses. And somewhere in here, there was my HTML file. So while we can do it like this, and this is done for doing things programmatically, I guess this will not help a lot. So what we are going to do now is we need some kind of CLI to interact with our model here. There is a gazillion of options you can choose. I'm using OpenCode here, You can also use Claude Code. You can use a lot of other CLIs, but I'm going with OpenCode because it's 100% free. And we now just say Ollama launch OpenCode config. So Ollama also supports this here. And we can now select our model. So we are using the small Qwen 3.1.7b again. It will start. And I will now give it again the same prompt before, like please create me a simple HTML. And what we will see now, it's still working, but we already see that it's taking longer as in the chat before. And why is that? Well, this has to do with the so-called context window. So as our OpenCode CLI now has some tools to interact with the file system, these tools need to be put into the context window, which is basically the short-term memory. And this means that it just takes a little longer here. But now we are golden, so we get the answer. I guess it's a similar answer, not the same, because LLMs are not deterministic. And yeah, it already says that without asking it, that it has written it to a folder. So that's very funny because every time I redo it, it's another folder. Because maybe I should have told him directly to write it, but it should now be like here, and we see here in our IntelliJ, yeah, it has written the HTML file to this folder, and it has worked. Okay, great. So now that we learned how to run a small model, I guess it's time to take on a bigger model. So let's again see what we have here. And we will now go for the Qwen 3.59b, which is a bigger model. What we need to do first is we have to stop our existing model because otherwise it will also consume memory. So we are going to do this, stop, and then we will do Ollama run Qwen 3.5. If you haven't already downloaded the model, it will start downloading the model on the first run, by the way. Okay, so let's again take a look in Ollama PS here. And we now see, yeah, it looks very similar to the previous one. The previous one had about 6 gigabytes of RAM, and now the bigger model with the 9 billion parameters already uses 11 gigabytes, but no problem because it's still fitting inside our GPU here, which is still very important. So now we are doing the same prompt again. Please create me a simple HTML file, or just HTML. And we already see it's thinking as the other one, but we see it's thinking more and it's slower, which is expected because it's a more powerful model that we are running here. So yeah, it's thinking, so what should it do? And it's figuring out, and now it has a plan and said, okay, I can try to generate the HTML. Man, this is really taking long. But I expect that we will have the same problem as before. It will just give me the HTML, but it won't be able to save it to disk. So, because for this, we need to use a CLI again. So, as we see, it's much slower as the previous one. And this is also very important. So, the 9B is currently the one that is just fitting into my memory. There are even bigger and better models like 27, but they won't fit, and this would make everything very slow. Okay, I hope it will finish at some point. Otherwise, I will just break it. Footer section. Yeah, okay, it's telling a lot how to use it. I will stop it for now. If I say like, please write the file to index.html, it should still not do it. And again, we see it has to think a lot. Yeah, and we see the model is much more intelligent. So now when I say do it, it says, no, I cannot do that. I'm not able to do this. So we see already that the model is much more powerful, but of course with the trade-off that it's slower. So I will break this up because it's chatting a lot. So we will now again use OpenCode like we did before, and we will select here the 9B model. It will start and I will give it the same prompt. Please create me a simple HTML file. So as we already saw, this should now create an HTML and write it to disk, right? And we see again, it's taking longer, but this is expected. It already took us longer in the other open code with a smaller model. But I can already tell you, I will stop this right now because this takes about 3, 4, 5 minutes on my machine to return for the first request. And this is very important. That's what we call the time to the first request. That's a key metric here. And this takes 5 minutes. Subsequent calls are much faster. They usually return in a couple of seconds, but the first one will take as long. And why is that? Well, and was also very confusing for me. This is again because of our context window. It contains all the tools and also maybe MCP tools that are in the context of OpenCode here. And our OpenCode has much more of them as the simple chat interface we are using here, which has 0. But again, this one cannot write interactive files. This one can. But this is not returning for now. So this is not beneficial, at least for the demo. So what can we do if we want to get a faster result? Well, what we can do is just another stupid CLI, or not a stupid, a good one. Instead of OpenCode, we will use Pi. So you see, Ollama is doing the heavy lifting of configuration here. I will choose the same thing. Launch Pi now. Okay. And now we are in Pi. And Pi is a similar CLI like OpenCode and Cloud, but it only uses 3 tools out of the box: read, write, and bash, which makes the context window much smaller. So now if we again do, please create me a simple HTML, it should return much faster. So again, and we see we have the response. And honestly, for me, this was very confusing. So I had to search on all the internet until I found that multiple people had the same issues here, and the people of OpenCode just explained, what do you expect? If you have a bigger context window, it will take longer. And we see here, it already says that it's creating the HTML and then it will eventually write it to disk. It's still taking longer than expected, but it should do that. Okay. So I let it work for a moment. So the question is, where will we go from here? So of course, just creating HTML files is not beneficial. So this is something I will not show in the demo here, but eventually you might do something more complicated. For example, creating a Spring Boot service. So this is my get-go for verifying models. And for this, you can do something like this. You can write Markdown files that explain how to build services. So we have a very simple Markdown file like here, which says, please write me a new service with Spring Boot and Kotlin. You have an example here, and you have another spec here that explains exactly how to do it. And this is a much more bigger task. So this is not something we will do within this demo, because this will take about 60 minutes to complete. But we already see here, my Pi has returned, and it should now have created the index HTML, and see here it is. Okay, so I will stop the demo right now. So what we should have learned today is very important. So we should have learned how to run models. We should have learned that it's important that they fit inside the GPO. We have learned about tools and about the context window. And that's all we can do for this demo today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next video.